Man, just when you think I've finished it all, more dualities. But I'm not going to belabor it this time, and I am going to post some passages from the book about the duality that I'm going to discuss. I'm just going to touch on it again right now, and then I also want to talk about the theme of great expectation. And I'm sorry if there's distortion in the sound sometimes, but last week when my computer crashed, I bought a new webcam, and the sound is actually much better on it, and I'm not losing it like I used to with the old one. But I'm also still trying to adjust to getting the best distance from the microphone in order for it to work. But back to the dualities. The women in this book also exhibit dualities, as do Pip and Wemmick and male characters. And of course, one of the big dualities is that between Estella and Miss Havisham. Now, Miss Havisham, of course, was jilted at the altar decades ago. And she stops time. She literally tries to stop time, as does Emily in A Rose for Emily. Make that correlation, draw those inferences between pieces of literature. But she stops time. And I've already said one of my favorite scenes is when she takes Pip into the room where the wedding feast was. Because of this incident, Miss Havisham hates men. She hates all men. And Dickens in portraying this bitter old woman who walks around with a shoe in her hand because she was just about to put her shoe on when she got the news about her fiance jilting her, literally half an hour or whatever before the wedding. His portrayal of this woman is also about class, because Miss Havisham was marrying beneath her. Now again, she is not nobility, but her father was very well-to-do and very rich. She was going to marry beneath her. So it was almost as a punishment to her that it all fell down around her. And then of course, she lived in this mansion then for, until she died. A prisoner, made a prisoner, almost like, Rapunzel in a tower, but it was an imprisonment of her own doing. But she hates men. And she gets this young girl, Estella, and of course we have learned by now, and I shouldn't be, imparting any secrets, that Estella's mother was the woman who works for Jaggers, the lawyer who's always washing his hands. And Miss Havisham takes this child, who turns out to be very beautiful, and instills in her this hatred for men that she feels. And Pip is a pawn. Pip is a pawn to Miss Havisham in order to sharpen Estella's, cruelty, and to punish, men for being men. And again, I'm going to, post some of the passages where this takes place, but it backfires on Miss Havisham. She turns Estella into this cruel, cold little girl, and then cruel, cold woman. But she does the job so well that Estella has no affection and no love for Miss Havisham. And that hurts Miss Havisham's feelings. She succeeded too well. So Estella and Miss Havisham are also alter egos. And Mrs. Pocket is also a type of an alter ego to Miss Havisham as well, because they both come, from money, and of course Miss Pocket does have the at least the air of being nobility. I think it's blown way out of proportion. But unlike Miss Havisham, who retreated to her solitude, Mrs. Pocket marries Mr. Pocket and has a bunch of kids, but she can't raise them. She is I don't want to say Miss Havisham is out of control, but she is. But she is, Miss Pocket, even though Miss Pocket's out of control, it's different than Miss Havisham's. It both stems for the same reason. They were not raised to function in the normal world. Miss Emily was not raised to function in the normal world. And these times were not so dissimilar from one another, because if Miss Emily, was a product of the Civil War and the antebellum South, Dickens finished Great Expectations around 1861. So these times are concurrent one another. It's just that one was in post Civil War South, and one is in Victorian England, same time period. So this is a theme within this book about the cultures, the place of women, and Dickens does not like this class system. Now, Dickens was also unhappily married to a woman. And I wonder sometimes, and I'm sure that there have been books written about this, whether his portrayal of Miss Havisham and Mrs. Pocket are also results of his unhappy marriage. He is much, much kinder to Biddy. Now, Mrs. Joe is treated with the same contempt as is Miss Havisham and Mrs. Pocket, because Mrs. Joe is a social climber. Biddy is not. Biddy wants to better herself, but she doesn't want to do it at the expense of others. She's not selfishly, grabbing it like Mrs. Joe is. And again, I talked about the names last week. Mrs. Joe doesn't even have an identity. She gets it from Mr. Joe, even though she's so much more of a forceful personality than he is. And then, of course, Biddy and Joe, get married after Mrs. Joe passes away. And they are about the only people in the book who get any type of reward or have any type of happiness. So what is the theme? Seek to better yourself, but class structure, to use the vernacular, sucks. Dickens was against that. So that is one of the themes of this book, the class structure, and then also the duality of the characters.